Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live program for technical sales professionals and technical sales leaders. And folks, these are live conversations. Here we are. It's Thursday, a week from Thanksgiving here in the United States. I'm dialing in actually from a little cabin in the woods, a few hours south of DC. And as I like to say, these conversations are by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And I am particularly delighted to welcome this week's guest. His name is David Yockelson. He is a distinguished VP and Gartner Fellow, and he has literally spent the last couple of years at what I would call ground zero, where the demo automation and interactive demo space lives. And he's actually going to tell us why he calls it interactive demos. We're going to be talking about AI. We're going to be talking about some of the capabilities, some of the lessons learned, etc. David, thank you so much for being here, sir. I know you are incredibly busy and you are paid a great deal of money to talk with people in this space, and you have agreed to volunteer a little bit of your time. How are you doing, sir?
Chris, well, my agent, if I had one, would thank you for that. I appreciate the warm welcome and attribution of the giant salary I don't have. But anyway, I'm doing great. Trust you are as well. Thanks so much for having me on the pod live, whatever we call this wonderful thing.
Yeah, I call it it's sort of my version of a podcast. It's LinkedIn Live, which is, I don't know, it's just kind of cool. It's a little bit different. So anyway. Folks, I told David offline backstage just a few minutes ago how excited I was for this conversation, if for no other reason, because he's just a great speaker. And David, of course, I don't mean to put any pressure on you, but I know it just comes to you easily. And you literally do spend your days talking to vendors in this space. You talk to companies and organizations that are leveraging these capabilities. I would love for you first to maybe just introduce yourself a little bit more broadly, maybe share a little bit of your journey and how you ended up in this position where you're talking to everyone about demo automation.
Well, it's a darn good thing that we have 6 hours for this conversation, because that's pretty much what.
Didn't I say the limit was 5 hours?
All right, fine. You want to be tough about it, but there's a trait that I've always attributed to good analysts. A good analyst can take any topic and talk about it for either 3 hours or for 3 minutes. Doesn't matter. So today, we'll do kind of an in-between version of that. But
love that.
I think it's probably useful for folks to understand what I do every day. I mean, you gave a good summary, but so first of all, I work for Gartner. That may be apparent. People, I think, have a notion of what Gartner does. Gartner's kind of traditionally known as the company that helps organizations that buy technology products figure out what to buy and who to buy them from. Kind of, simple approach.
Oh, and most people instantly think Magic Quadrant.
They do, right or wrong. They think that, and our brand value, would appreciate that. So I don't own a Magic Quadrant for what it's worth. And the thing that's a little bit different about what I do relative to what people tend to be used to about Gartner is that I work with a set of clients that are all technology companies of all shapes and sizes and maturity levels and all of that across categories. And as you suggest, I'm talking to them every day. In my case, largely about their go-to-market needs. So I am having conversations about how do we improve sales cycles, how do we do elements of marketing more efficiently, how do we, and germane to this conversation is how do we meet our buyers where they want to be met, and that has resulted in my several years ago, like you said, introduction to this technology area and the bevy of ongoing conversations I have about it.
Fabulous. And David, you mentioned to me a week or so ago how long you've been doing this. Can you just sort of provide a little bit of that context in terms of how long you've actually been a market analyst?
Yeah, I'd rather not, but just because it's been a long time. I'm so we have a term called a boomerang for somebody that goes out and comes back. I'm a multiple boomerang. So my formal background, I guess, in the business world was largely as being a product marketer. But I've done product marketing, I've done M&A, I've done corporate strategy, and so on. But I've bounced in and out of being an analyst a number of times for decent stretches. This current and I think final iteration of that has been the last, let's see, 6 years in this similar role at Gartner.
Yeah, excellent. But by the way, David, I just want to say hello to Cliff Barcliff. His is dialing in from Richmond, Virginia, actually only about an hour away from where I am. Cliff, nice to see you. By the way, anybody else, if you're out there, we don't see who's out there. So if you do care to say hello, please feel free to do so. And if you have any questions for David or myself, but David's really the star of today's show, please feel free to chime in and ask him questions. So David, I want to address something right out of the gate. When you and I were chatting the other day, I used the term demo automation. You used the term interactive demos. Can you educate me and our audience on why you use those particular words?
Yeah, can't we all just get along? So entirely cognizant that there are people in the world that approach this using both forms of the terminology. So the simple answer for me is that when I started discovering and looking at this technology 3-ish years ago, 4 years ago, the demo automation side of it to me, or the way of thinking about demo automation to me, was about automating a process that typically is undertaken by pre-sales people, SEs, AEs, and so on. And while that's entirely valid, I think more on the buyer side of things. So I think I mostly thought about this technology area as, well, what is it that a buyer expects to be able to do? And what they want to do is, ultimately see the value of a product that you have, but they're being provided an interactive way to engage with the product. So, notwithstanding whatever the majority was saying, or what individual vendors were saying, I put a stake in the ground and said, hey, I'm going to recognize this as interactive demo applications, the things that create them. But I'm going to throw you a curveball.
I love that.
I am going to suggest that both of them may not be entirely accurate.
Okay.
Because they both have their positives, they both have their negatives. But if we take it a step along the way of, so what is it that prospects and customers are really trying to do, or what do you as vendors want to give them? To take a page out of the product-led world, what we want to provide is what I'll call a product experience. And that product experience can take a lot of different forms, and never mind demo. There are lots of ways to give a product experience. Could be the actual live instance of a product, could be a sandbox, could be a demo, could be a POC, could be all of those things. And for, in many cases, it is all of those things. But from my perspective, where this market and technology is and where it's headed is to be able to provide those product experiences, no matter what they are, across the range of the buying process. So that's, sorry, that was more than you asked for, but
no, but I love that. So then the term potentially is, it's not demo automation, but it maybe it's product experience solution. Is that sort of?
Yes. I'll agree. This is not me trying to change the whole.
Right. You're not trying to create a new category necessarily, right?
Same category. I just like to talk about it. Yeah.
But I think this is a really key point, and this is an aha moment for me. Until you said, I think of it from the perspective of the buyer. And that's why I call it interactive demos, because that's what I want to touch it. I want to feel it. I want to hold it. I want to experience it. Right. That flipped the switch in my brain. And I absolutely love that. And even taking a step further, maybe it's not just product experience, maybe it's value experience. Right.
Ooh, there's a good term that's, when I'm not doing interactive demo or product led, I'm doing value and value articulation and economic value and business cases. So, but 100%. Very simple sentence. compound sentence I use is, what do you want to be able to do? You have to be able to show the value of what you offer, and you have to be able to talk about the value of what you offer. And those things are done very differently, but they're both part of what marketers and sellers and all the folks in between need to get done.
And the more we can enable our prospects to do that on their own, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The more we can scale.
Yes. Yeah. And so there's something that underpins this that we're not really saying. So part of the roots, and it goes back to your original question of why demo automation, why interactive demo. So as this market was forming or beginning to mature, there was this split. There were vendors that were vehemently on the sales side of things. We're going after the sales use cases. We want to help SEs get their lives back, all of this. And those were the demo automation people. And then there were the people, well, we're going to go after marketing because websites are awful and buyers want to, just as you said, they want to do their own thing. And we're going to call that interactive demo. What part of the notion behind product experience is it gets us away from this division. It's not that they're both valid, but trying to come up with a way to generalize and think about the category holistically. That's why I think that way.
It's really helpful. Really helpful. And again, already beginning to change the way I think about this space and these technologies. You mentioned when this industry or this category was just beginning to form and evolve. I know you've been on this journey for about 3 years. I would love to just invite you to just take a step back and sort of consider maybe what are some of the most significant lessons learned over the past 3 years, and how have you seen this industry or this category evolve in those 3 years?
That's interesting to think through. So I think there are a few things that surprise me as it continues to mature, and the things that customers and users of the technology are discovering as they go. So one thing is I find, and I think that it's viral. So there are lots of different use cases for this technology. We just brought up the sales, or at least one, a couple of the sales use cases. There's marketing use cases, but there's product management use cases. There's customer success use cases. There's usage and adoption, so on and so forth. And because the technology works, and really 98% of the time, these products work and they deliver value. And when it works for a single use case, it then spreads. Other people in the organization see it, they want it. So I think people are, or organizations are beginning to think strategically about it. And that I think is a change from, hey, we're laser focused on helping our SEs and our AEs, and we're going to implement for that. And some of those same organizations are talking to me now saying, hey, but marketing wants this. Can we use the same thing? Or they may not even know what the other function is using. So anyway, so that I think is one thing. At the same time, what is it's fascinating to me because I'm a nerd in a way here, but the overriding criterion so far for most people making this buying decision is easy and fast. Which has implications for the market, because it's not necessarily true that the easiest, fastest thing is going to be able to serve every use case.
Of course,
but I also don't think that, and I don't mean this to sound bad about the level of maturity of the buyers, but I don't think most buyers understand which of the technology options delivers them the right thing for the right use case. And I think the market as a whole has done, and I will blame myself in this as well, there's only so many things I can write and say. I think the market has done a poor job at demarcating this type of technology solves this problem for the buyer in this situation, and you use this one here and that one there.
Yeah.
The sort of good news for the market is it's a rising tide that's carrying all ships so far, with a little bit of exception, but that's going to change. And I think it's going to change, pretty dramatically over the next year, 18 months or so.
Yeah. So I'm going to summarize the three things that you said that you think you've really seen over these three-ish years. Is oftentimes these implementations become viral because when they're implemented, you're seeing a high degree of success. And once there's success in one area, it tends to spread into other areas of the organization. The second is you've seen a shift from more tactical approaches to more strategic approaches, where I guess in the earlier days when you started looking at this, people were just trying to solve one specific problem. Now they're thinking a little bit more broadly. A term that I've heard used a few times, particularly by the folks over at Reprise, is demo program. They were the ones that sort of introduced me to that idea. And then the other thing is this idea that the criteria initially was just fast and easy. And it sounds like now maybe the criteria is getting a little bit more sophisticated, but maybe the industry hasn't become sophisticated enough to say, well, if these are your criteria, these are maybe the types of tools or the types of capabilities you should be looking for to address those criteria. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I think, we don't have hours of time, so we're making generalizations. So, there are certainly customers who pour over every iota of the technology because, they have a complex application. And if you're going to clone a complex application, it actually has to look right, and the scripts have to be transferred and understood and all of that. Yeah. So, there are smart. In fact, I think one of the things that's happened, and sorry, I'm going to complete a sentence soon here, but this market is moving so quickly. Everything that you just summarized is really, within the last year. So it's a hockey stick of maturity. The only thing that I see moving faster is Gen AI, which we'll talk about eventually. But anyway, so there are customers that put the stuff through its paces. But I think a part of it is that organizations have silos, and notwithstanding those organizations that have demo programs, or what I'll call a demo czar, who oversees all of the product experiences that they make available to whomever. Organizations that don't have that are more likely to approach this on a function by function, use case by use case sort of a thing, which is the way people buy things. They buy stuff to solve a pain point. The good news, the efficacy of the technology is so high that's what's helped buoy the whole thing.
I so love hearing that. I mean, you hear of technology that doesn't live up to the hype. And what I hear you saying is that in this case, from your experience, the technologies that are out there are living up to the hype. And I love that. David, let me just push our pause button just for a moment. Folks, I'm speaking to David Yockelson. I asked for the correct pronunciation. And if you're not familiar with David, he is a distinguished VP and Gartner fellow with, as you might guess, Gartner. He is responsible for the research in the demo automation / interactive demo space. And this is what we're talking about today. Again, we don't see you out there. If you care to say hello, please feel free to do so. If you have any questions for David or myself, of course, feel free to ask. David, you opened Pandora's box. The lid is off, so let's go there. AI. You mentioned AI. Yeah. I was going to ask you, we talked a little bit about what you've seen over the past 2-3 years. My next question was going to be, what do you see in the next, let's just say 2-3 years, because heck, we don't even know what 6 months might bring. And I suspect AI is part of that answer.
You suspect correctly, Chris, which is why you make the big bucks. We're in Gen AI dog years kind of thing. So 2 to 3 years is way too far out.
I love that. By the way, I love that statement. I'm gonna use that moving forward.
I'm going to try to remember the quote that we used here for another presentation, but it's like, you as companies that are developing and making available products, you have to realize that there's a new thing every 6 months. You're going to have to reinvent how you talk about, how you differentiate, all that. Anyway, so things happen really quick. So I think and I'm in the midst of formulating the real words behind this, even as we speak, for some other stuff that I'm going to be doing. But I think that AI and Gen AI will change the face of this market by 18 months from now. I think by 2026,
Wow.
things are going to look pretty different. And I'm happy to explain why I think that.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I would love to hear in what context, because I don't, not only do I not disagree, I doubt if anybody disagrees with that statement, but I don't think any of us could guess in what way. And I have a feeling you could.
Yeah, I could guess. So, and I think, right now, the way that I will talk about this is ahead of the skis. I think, most organizations aren't there yet. On the other hand, were we ready for ChatGPT and everything it can do? So no. So let me back up a little bit and talk about, what the state of the art has been and then what is going to change with that. So AI, and I'm going to distinguish AI and ML versus Gen AI. AI ML has been a part of this market, for a couple of years, and it's been used for language translation and scripting to an extent, that sort of stuff. And it's useful. If I can get my demos out there in 27 languages, that's fantastic. And if I can voice over in a particular language, that's great also. One of the things that's been added, and this is sometimes it's AI and sometimes it is now Gen AI driven, is the notion of synthetic data. Why is synthetic data interesting? Now, this is particularly interesting for your world of pre-sales and SEs and so on. Is data brings context to demos. Having an empty application doesn't do anyone any good, and so when you want to show something off, it's got to have data in it. And I will guess that you don't want that data to be a customer's data. It can't be PII. Not only that, and also you want to tailor that when you can to the individual instance that the demo that you're giving to someone. So increasingly, it is Gen AI stuff, magic, that is generating the data for those demos. And it's another discussion about, is it a clone? Is it real? Is it this? Suffice it to say that there's a role to be played for Gen AI, and the value is speed and repeatability. So I can, and I'm embellishing it just a little bit, but I can press a button and have a demo that makes sense for hospitality right now, and I can press another button and it makes sense for oil and gas in 3 minutes. Think about the time savings and effort savings and all of that for the SE world. So that's one thing. Now, where is this going? Folks may have read and seen, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, in which Anthropic, the folks behind Claude, announced that, hey, guess what? Claude can now actually run applications. So I'm making keystrokes here like Claude has hands, but it'll actually execute commands and run applications for you. If you think about the if you think about the ultimate conclusion of that, and you think about where Gen AI is today with demos. So today, there's a handful of vendors that if you feed their product information about what your product is and what it does, or you feed them an onboarding script, they will generate what is effectively a video demo that's voiced over nicely and allows you to ask it questions about, hey, does your product do this? Yes, it does. Here, look at this. Really cool. I mean, I think that in and of itself is pretty neat.
Yeah.
But then you take the next step and say, okay, well, now I don't want to necessarily be involved in these. I want to make an instance of my product available to my buyer, and maybe it's a cloned instance or something like that, or sandbox kind of a thing. And I want them to engage with some intelligent thing that's going to let them walk through and answer questions and so on. So, as Gen AI as it can run the applications and respond and show you, hey, if you press this button, you enter this data, here's what happens. And it's really, I don't believe it's that far off. That's why I'm saying, by 2026, we're going to see this, and we're going to see it, more than once. So there you go.
I'll be honest, it's both unbelievably impressive staggeringly impressive, but also a tad terrifying, I think, for some
Yeah, a little
people.
bit. Yeah, totally is.
And terrifying, I think, for some, someone like myself who has spent the better part of 20 years giving demos, answering technical questions, presenting. But where do you see, and I always, even when I was selling software, I would get a question, well, can your software do this? Or can your software do this? And there was one question that I always answered in this way, or there was one answer that I would frequently come to when the customer or the prospect was asking me something, if the platform could do that was just beyond reasonable for the platform. I would say these words: there's always a line at which the technology stops and the smart people start. And so to do what you're asking, we can get you to here, but then you need smart people. So my question for you is, in this space, knowing or anticipating where AI may be going to, where is that line where the AI can only go so far, but you still need smart technical salespeople, if I can use that term, to help customers make the right decision?
So if you think about it in terms of, and I want to say funnel, and funnel is even now an outdated notion, I think, because of SaaS and because you have to go through the deal close, you got to renew and all that sort of stuff. But so I beg everyone's forbearance for a minute, but funnel, bow tie, loop, whatever you want to think of. The whole goal, in my view, of this technology that we're talking about is shorten the sales cycle, make things go faster. Letting the buyer do what they want. We know that buyers don't want to talk to sellers right off the bat. They ultimately they have to, and it kind of gets to your smart people thing. But really the benefit is squeeze down the sales cycle time and get that prospect to a point where they're not going to make a decision yet, but they probably want to see the real thing with their data, with their integrations, this and that. So the short answer is we're going to get better and better and better at squeezing that down and getting to the point where those smart people are not going to be wasting their time spinning up, a double application instance and just showing you, hey, the thing actually works. They're going to spend their time doing a little bit of tailoring at the point that either there's a POC or a POV, or maybe you don't need one at that point because the right people have had their hands onto something that's a lot like the actual product with data that's a lot like theirs. By the way, I never want to say POCs and POVs are entirely going away, because I don't think that it's not a conclusion of the stuff that we have today for the most part. So that's why I emphasize the cycle shortening. But yeah, I think what we want to be able to use those smart people when they can help those prospects be or understand the application, product, service, whatever, in their context, and
Love that.
Tailor it that way.
And David, this is again, I benefit probably more than anybody from these conversations. So I appreciate what you're saying a great deal. A few things really clicked for me. First of all, when you said shorten the sales cycle, and we all know that really getting a customer on board, honestly, it's not that much of a big deal anymore. I mean, yes, that's something to celebrate, but the celebration should come in a year, 2 years, 3 years, when that customer is actually realizing value, they're renewing, they're growing, they want to do more, right? So to me, it shifts the focus more to not just getting them onboarded, but making them successful.
Yeah. By the way, I mean, you raise a really interesting notion, which is, remember we just said, it's not a funnel that stops at deal close. This is a thing that goes to implementation. So imagine the same vendor world that we're talking about here. The capability doesn't go away when the deal closes. It sticks around and says, okay, you bought this thing. Now you've got N 100,000 whatever users that need to figure out how to use it effectively. And yeah, we have digital adoption platforms and applications and so on, but I don't think there's any question that this technology area, the product experience stuff, can play a role in that too. So let's help get people adopting and using so that they see value from it. And let's also show them the other amazing things they could do with the stuff they haven't bought yet. So yeah, this is, the general capability set that we're talking about spans the buying, owning, the whole thing.
Well, and the other thing that you said, and by the way, Cliff has asked actually a few questions. So Cliff, thank you for your questions, and we're going to get to them, I promise. The other thought, the other sort of aha moment that I had is that the value of, and again, just my audience is largely the sales engineer, the sales engineer leader, the technical sales professional. And I'm always concerned about protecting, preserving, and advancing that role. What comes to mind for me is it's that much more important for us to engage with customers in such a way where we are bringing new ideas. We are helping them better understand how they can leverage and benefit from our solutions in ways they hadn't considered, right? Yep. That's where we really began to add value. Okay, so a few of Cliff's comments.
I'm reading them too. Yeah.
Yeah. Could not agree more. It's all about impact. Now, David, Cliff, you asked a few questions of David, but before I get to your actual questions, it's interesting, and this ties to one of his questions. He said, I see this tech better utilized by product marketing. The buyer decision making has been pushed way forward and often before sales gets involved. So I'm curious to see how you respond to that. My perception is that there's sort of an equal value in marketing and sales. Do you agree with that position, that it's an equal value?
I at the risk of saying I haven't done calculations that work it out, but at a high level, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm being an analyst for a second.
You're being an analyst, that's right.
But yeah, there's a ton of value on both sides of it. In fact, so a couple of things. I think it's sort of interesting if you think about it that the embedding the demo on the website sort of stuff that we attribute to marketing really is replacing what SDRs do. I mean, it is a demo. It's a manual human demo that isn't being given because it's sitting there on the website. Now it's marketing that owns the website, and it's them that's controlling the demo as content sort of thing here. But it's useful to think about it, about what it's replacing. But Chris and Cliff, sorry, Chris, absolutely right. There's a ton of value on both sides, and so a couple of interesting things. One is, I did a poll on LinkedIn 3 weeks ago, something like that, where I said, hey, you all tell me, what are the use cases that are of most interest to you?
Yeah.
Sales and marketing product. And overwhelmingly, it was the sales side or the SE sales side of things. So I was kind of surprised by that, given that my normal audience tends to skew more toward the marketing side of things, but fine. So there's that. And then I think, for Cliff's benefit, the value to pre-sales and to SEs is, you made the point yourself, is I'd rather never give a demo again, this kind of thing. I don't know if that's possible, but in a sales cycle that maybe has 5 demos, one is better than 5, and getting rid of the early ones is one thing, but the other value prop here is, particularly if you have a complicated product, or let's say I'm a vendor that has a product that runs on ServiceNow or runs on Salesforce or runs on whatever. And so in order to do a demo, I've got to spin up 2 things. I got to make sure that they work. I got to put data in them, and I got to tailor that to this account now. And I got to do it again half an hour from now. Yeah. That's, there's almost no need for that, at this point. So the technology is, and I see numbers every day of hours and hours that it saves the SEs, and it allows them to do the better things of, how do I help this customer see and understand the value of what we do? Parenthetically, so I actually wrote a report on, hey, pre-sales and product marketing need to work more tightly together on stuff like demos and value, because
Amen.
they go together. Yeah.
Yep. Amen. Well, and getting back to the quote, the smart people, I mean, what I hear you saying is that these technologies are going to continue to let, quote, the smart people, the sales engineer, do more of the best work that they can do, right? I mean, the analogy I always use is, whenever it was that the nail gun was created, I'm sure, somebody in the world knows what that date was. There were probably a few carpenters that felt a little bit intimidated by the fact that, well, there's now there's a nail gun, and the fact that I'm an expert with a hammer, that threatens my job. Yeah. The nail gun didn't make the carpenter obsolete. It just made the carpenter that much more effective at what they do, right?
100%.
So that's sort of how I see these things. Cliff asked another question, and I'm going to change it just so slightly. He said, yep. Has the buyer of these products changed? I'm going to ask just a very slightly different question in the same context. My assumption is that when you talk to people who are looking for or considering these technologies, that you are talking to both marketing people and salespeople.
Yep.
My question for you is going to be aimed more towards the sales side. What role on the sales side are you typically speaking to? Yeah. And what are they concerned about? What are they asking for? What are they trying to solve for?
I'll try to answer this without being mean to the people I'm going to talk about. But so on the and Cliff, I'll tailor a little bit to your thing. So let me really quick answer. The buyer hasn't changed. It's multiple buyers. You have multiple buyers, because even though I think everyone should think strategically about this, it's still coming down on, we want to solve this thing first. And it might be a sales thing. It might be a marketing thing. So
okay, great.
All of those exist. Now on the sales side, the initial focus for all of the demo automation vendors and folks that focused on the sales side of the equation was the SE leader, pre-sales leader, that sort of thing. And they're the ones that have the pain. So sounds logical, right? But the reality is not all of them have budget. Most, if not all of them, report up to a CRO or something like that. And that person does have budget. And this is the part where I'm not trying to be mean. I've worked with Superman, Superwoman SEs over my career who save deals, create deals, do all sorts of stuff with a product to make it dance the way that a customer wants to in order to get things done. So they're incredibly valuable. But at the end of the day, the CRO doesn't care how hard they're working. Not that person's concern isn't how can I save a couple of hours of SE time. Right. And so, sorry, it's a really long answer to the short question, but I think what most of the vendors in the space are discovering, and the way that they're approaching it, and the folks who have budget, it's sales. So if you accept my comment before that the value of this technology ultimately shortens sales cycles. Everybody wants that. CRO desperately wants that. The CRO wants to be able to drive efficient pipeline. And if getting there means I can throw in some demos that buyers can do, and it's going to give some data back about what they want, all of that, so much the better. So so I think the user of it, pre-sales, and to an extent, it's also AEs and SDRs. Yeah. But I think the smart money is on the CROs, ultimately signing off that, being the economic buyer.
So that's so insightful, and it triggered another couple of questions. First of all, is it fair to say that you speak with a fair number of CROs? Is that the type of role that you would often speak with?
Not. I think, to be honest, not as often as CMO, but okay. Yes.
So when you do speak with a CRO, Are they specifically asking you questions related to interactive demo, or
No.
is that something that maybe they're trying to do this, and that's where you introduce the idea potentially of interactive demos?
Yeah, it's all customer size based. So, obviously, smaller the company, the more I may talk to a CRO who is interested or may know. But an interesting thing about this technology and this maturity growth path that it's on is if I go back a year, 18 months, 70% of the time, if not more, I was introducing the technology to people, and then I would back into it. So, I would get calls about how do we shorten our sales cycle? How do we not lose prospects that are in the funnel? How do we keep people entertained? How do we
Pipeline efficiency, as you just mentioned,
right? So all this kind of stuff, and this technology became the hammer where all of that go-to-market stuff was a nail. And so I would be able to say, well, I have something for you that you have to take a look at. What's happened now, in that intervening time, people have gotten a lot smarter, a lot more quickly. And so that 70% is now something like, I'm going to guesstimate at 40%. So there are many more educated buyers, some of whom are CROs. Let me put it this way. I think it's going to be the rare, particularly in the larger company, it's going to be the rare CRO or CMO that knows that this technology exists and maybe knows enough to name a few vendors in it. It's going to be like any other technology. It's going to be a tier down, the people that they rely on. So maybe it's sales ops, maybe it's, something like that, or they're relying on in this case, the main influencer who might be the SE leadership or pre-sales leadership to say, hey, there's a thing that's going to solve these issues that we have. Help me out, sign off, save my life, that kind of thing. So Anyway, that was a little bit convoluted.
Really helpful. It triggered another thought, and I hope this is going to expose a really insightful observation on your part.
I hope so.
For those CROs, and you're right. You sort of said, look, most CROs aren't going to bed at night thinking, boy, I sure wish I could save my SEs, a few hours a week in prep time, right? I mean, that's not in their whiteboard, as I like to say. My question for you is, what should revenue leaders and maybe rev ops leaders, what should they understand about these technologies and these capabilities that maybe they don't recognize or they don't see? And if they did, would change their mind about this idea of introducing these technologies into their go-to-market plan, a strategy, approach, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's recognizing the efficacy of the technology throughout the buying process. So, I think, and for this, it doesn't matter whether it's a RevOps lead or a growth lead or a CMO or whatever. You have to have, and maybe it's a RevOps person that's better at this because they're going to have a more comprehensive view of the buyer journey. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. So I think if you take a look at a buyer journey and you say that along the way to closing a deal, and we'll stop there, that buyer has to grok, use an old California term, the value of what you're offering. They have to know that it is going to solve a problem that they have, that it's going to solve it in a way that's workable, and that they're going to be able to deploy this thing and use it effectively. And that is going to take a bunch of shapes along the way. It's going to be, awareness sorts of things that marketing is responsible for. It's going to be contextual demonstrations of value that pre-sales is responsible for. It's going to be a later on, let's get into the nuts and bolts kind of thing that may still be pre-sales, maybe an AE with it or whatever. But if they're looking across that span and they're smart enough to realize that they are not in control of the process, that the buyer is in control of that process, and the buying team that's made up of 5, 8, 10 people, depending upon company size. So they're the ones that are in control. And so the more you can appease that group and get them to consensus, that's a big thing for buying teams. They got to do their buying jobs, and then they have to agree that they're solving the right problem and that they're solving it with the right vendor. Well, the more stuff you can give them so that they can get there, the better off. And that's the view that they have to have, where this technology is a big part of it.
Again, David, as you were speaking, I had another light bulb go on, and it's just such a powerful thought for me. And that is this. I think revenue leaders naturally tend to think, what can I do, or what can we do to make our people more productive, make our people more effective, make our people more efficient? That's the wrong question. And that's not the question that these tools are answering. The question that these tools are answering are, how can we make the buyer more efficient? How can we make the buyer, how can we help the buyer? That's real. To me, there's the probably the thing that they're not thinking about. Right.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you kind of get one with the other. So, and I totally don't want to play down the efficacy on the pre-sale side of it, because, like I said, I see so many examples where it's hours and it's time and it's risk reduction and all this kind of thing. I mean, everyone has been part of a demo that failed because the internet broke or whatever, or the application didn't work, or, that kind of thing. So even preventing those things is a huge win. But yeah, so I think it's both sides of a coin. So I would agree with you, and my focus generally is, how do we, like I said in the beginning, meet the buyers where they want to be met? But, as an extra added bonus, you also get to enable your pre-sales people and your salespeople to do, and this is a favorite phrase of mine now, to do less with less. So, everybody has always been anxious. We want to do more with less. No, I think, you want to deal with as few qualified prospects that are going to buy something as possible. So what better way to do that than let them self-qualify? Give them an ability to say, hey, this thing fits my need, and now I want to take a next step, versus spray and pray SDRs. Let's contact a bazillion people and half of them don't fit my ICP, that kind of thing. So, there's a lot that goes into a benefit of efficiency and effectiveness. At the same time, you get to let the buyers do things the way they want. Yeah.
Again, just love that. Another key takeaway for me: do less with less. it's so simple yet so.
I wish I had invented that. My colleagues over on the sales side of the equation here at Gartner invented that, but I love it.
It's brilliant. David, let me push our pause button one more time. Folks, I'm speaking to David Yockelson. He is a distinguished VP and Gartner fellow with, of course, Gartner, as many of us, probably most of us, are familiar. We're talking about demo automation, interactive demos, product experience, as he likes to refer to it. David, if you can believe it, we've been at this for almost 50 minutes already. So the time goes by very, very fast. We've had quite a few questions, certainly from Cliff. Folks, we've got about 10 minutes more. If you have any comments or questions for David, but before we drop, there was one question from Cliff that I wanted to circle back on. He used this term just-in-time buyer enablement. If I'm fully honest, I'm not sure I've ever heard that term put quite that way. Is that a term that you've been using yourself? And is this, to Cliff's question, is this tech becoming the key to, quote, just-in-time buyer enablement?
Yeah. I mean, I think it already is in a lot of ways. So buyer enablement is a term that we've been using a lot for a while. And it goes, hand in glove with let's let the buyer do things the way that they want. Let's not force them to do things the way that we think they should be done. So there's that. And then, there's just that just-in-time aspect of it. It happens today. Every interactive demo that's on a website is doing that. again, what's the way that you do this without this technology is you have to have a person and a demo spun up. I have to, there's a 1-to-1 match between, I need a human to show this thing to that prospect. And if that doesn't happen, it's days or weeks or months of calendaring and all sorts of other wacky stuff. So when I put a thing on my website, now that thing can be a product tour, it can be a sandbox, it can be, a whole host of different product experiences. But yeah, you're enabling just in time. The prospect can look at it 24/7. They can invite their buying team members to look at it. They can send the URL to somebody else, which, by the way, helps you uncover other members of the buying team, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I think we're there today.
Yeah. Do you? I know you talk to people, a lot of people, sort of on the front side of this journey when they're either they're looking for specific solutions or capabilities, or they're just struggling with some problem, and it turns out that these solutions might be a good fit. Do you get the opportunity to speak with people who maybe have attempted to implement something like this? And do you get an insight into some of the mistakes that people make, particularly on the sales side? And if so, what are some of those mistakes, if I can use that term very, very broadly, that you've witnessed?
Yeah, to be honest, I think there are more mistakes on the marketing side than the sales side, because I think it's a different proposition of what we're trying to get done. But what I'll say is this: I think, and it's not so much a mistake as an expectation that I think a couple of years ago wasn't met, where these products have billed themselves as a facsimile of your actual product. Well, it turns out some applications have wackadoodle scripts on the front end and do all sorts of strange things that were really difficult to recreate.
Gotcha.
Over the last 1+ years, some of the vendors have gotten really good at dealing with that, just to be simple about it. And then there are also other forms where you've got overlays on live applications to get rid of that problem. Anyway, so the mistake might have been, I expect this thing to be an exact duplicate, and maybe it wasn't. That really doesn't happen much anymore. I think the other, I don't know if I call it a mistake, but this gets to the virality of it. I think decisions have been made and have scaled up, and things are going great in some of the larger implementations, but they were made in absentia of other functions, which happens. This is what happens in large organizations. So, I think with hindsight, or now today, that there are lots of companies are saying, well, we have this and it's good. Now I want to think about it in these other 3 places, and can I use the same thing? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. Those are some things. And then I'll give you one last one. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please. Please finish.
The only other quick one is, in this world of sales versus marketing, please do not take the demo that the SC uses to manually show off the product, the clone, and throw it on the website. Because, like I said, there are many more mistakes on the marketing side. One of them is not telling your story effectively. So it's a caution.
Amen to that. And I know there's a lot of folks in the space that are now starting to talk more about the difference between the in-person, if I can use the term, real-time interactive demo versus the automated demo. And look, there's lots of talks about the different types of demos, right? There's the introductory demo, there's the deep dive demo, the
visionary demo.
I mean, we could spend an hour just talking about that. I have 2 more questions, and then I'm just going to invite you to share just some closing thoughts. The first question is, you've been doing this for about 3 years. This has been, if not 100% of your focus, a large percentage of your focus. What excites you the most, given what you've experienced and learned over the past 3 years, and what you see based on where we are right now?
To be fair, I think it's probably 40% of my time, but somewhere around. Anyway,
I appreciate you keeping me honest. I mean, that's what analysts do.
There's a whole bunch of things I do here across the go-to-market span, but this is, it's a labor of love, because I used to build demos, and I used to have to mess with hex code to make them work right. So good Lord. Anyway, So I think the thing that excites me is the fact that, we're talking about this like it's a humongous market. It's not. The total revenue of the 30 plus players in this market does not exceed $100 million. And I think I'm being charitable with that. So the thing that excites me is the potential. There are some of the companies that have lots of users and customers, but we're scratching the surface on what this can do.
That is an amazing, and that is, I really appreciate you bringing that back, because you're right. I live in this world, and many of the people that I talk to are either using some of these capabilities or thinking about these capabilities. But what if you had to guess the percentage of technology companies that are leveraging these capabilities? What would you venture to guess? I assume single digits.
Yeah, let's just say, I'm going to try to do the math in my head really quick. Let's say there are 200,000 SaaS companies out there. Not even 20,000 of them are using this yet. So what is that, 10%?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's under 10%.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, gonna flip the script just a touch. What concerns you the most about this industry and this market and where it's headed, if anything?
I don't think I have concerns about it, because the good news sort of is, like I said, that the products work. So I don't worry that I'm leading somebody down a path where they're going to be disappointed. So that's sort of good news. I guess I'll tell you what worries me. In the Gen AI story I told before, what I worry is, the rug is going to be pulled out from under the thing, in a year, and we won't even recognize what we're talking about. Which, from the perspective of, if I put my buyer hat on, the kind of stuff that's going to be available is going to be fantastic. It's going to make my life a hell of a lot easier. But if I were one of those 30 plus vendors in this space, and I was not significantly looking at investing in figuring out my Gen AI plans, I would be pretty worried.
Yeah. Well, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's not just because everyone's talking about AI, right? And but I think there's a difference between what I call just sort of flashy AI and strategic AI.
Yeah.
And I think the winners are going to be those who are thinking about AI in a very creative and meaningful way, and thinking about it, leveraging AI in ways that people haven't considered or thought of.
Yeah, and for this vendor space, I think part of it is, it's not just the demo aspect of it and how it gets created and served up. It's the things around it. So think about the buyer journey. How much can you know? People do demos, and one of the valuable things in doing a live demo is the discovery portion of it. 100%. Well, what if you don't have to do a bunch of that? What if you can suddenly intuit a huge amount about this account that you're working with based on Gen AI magic? Well, awesome.
Yeah.
So there are things like that are adjacencies that the technology is going to help deliver and expand.
Yeah. Awesome. David, you have been so generous with your time. I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation. The hour flew by unbelievably fast. We are going to wrap things up. As I like to say, the landing gear is out, the runway is in sight, and we're going to land this plane on time.
Awesome.
Any final comments, just thoughts from you, as we kind of wrap things up?
Yeah, I guess, we don't know if folks that are watching this have implemented or thinking of implemented or going to whatever. There's absolutely no excuse. This is a double negative. Sorry. There's no excuse not to try this. Several vendors have freemium products. There's zero risk involved. Just go. You owe it to yourself to see what the technology can do, knowing that it's probably not the full thing. But try it out. That's my parting salvo. Just go try it and see what you can do with it. And I think you'll be astonished.
Yeah. Well, and to that end, we were talking about the winners in that space are going to be the winners that, if I can just use some very simple terminology, those who get AI right. I think likewise in the software space, the winners in 2, 3, 5 years are going to be ones that are taking full advantage of these capabilities and these technologies to shorten the sales cycle, to make the buyer's effort more effortless, more efficient, more effective, etc. So it's a great way to close. David, thank you so much for being here. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I know we had Cliff on. I suspect we probably had at least a handful of other folks on live. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you're catching the recording, I hope you enjoyed it as well. I will be back. I think I have a session next week. I don't know. It's Thanksgiving. I may or may not have a session next week. But David, I hope will you revisit me maybe 6, 8, 12 months, and we can see how we advanced in a year.
This was so much fun, and I enjoyed the questions and your insight with them. I will happily come back and do that.
Well, that is so nice of you to say. David, do me a favor, hang around backstage just for a minute so we can say a few parting words to everyone else. Folks, if I do not see you next week, happy Thanksgiving if that's something you celebrate, and you can always follow Tech Sales Advice to get these live updates. Thanks so much all, and thank you, David. Bye all.
Thank you.